People, it's the Seahawks podcast that you love. Seattle Overload. And we have quotes from the 2024 NFL owners meetings that we're going to be talking about. Mainly Mike Macdonald stuff. We learned quite a bit about his defense, some more detail, and stuff on the quarterbacks as well, where suddenly Geno Smith is now a clear starter when they seem to really struggle around that. Although that being said, they weren't actually specifically asked about that. So we can talk about that. We've got some takes on that. But first, before all of that, Griffin, do you have a preamble topic? While I ask you for one, at David6628 yesterday commented on our latest Seahawks signings roundup, Baker, Wallace, Hankins, Ankrum podcast. Great content, guys. I'm starting to check out what you've got to say, and I just love your take on the team. Sharing with friends and family, especially my kids who now enjoy your stuff as well. Thanks. David, appreciate that. That's all we ask from you. Like the video, subscribe. I see you all in the chat talking about liking and subscribing. Look at you, Henry, kicking it off. Henry, thank you for the donation the other day as well. Appreciate that. Share it with family, friends, your social media preference, etc., etc. Yeah, Henry, that quote in isolation. Don't know if he was going necessarily for that. But yeah, Griff, preamble.
Right. This is where we talk about mundane things before the episode starts, right?
Well, we also had another comment saying great preamble.
Oh wow.
So I think the preamble. Listeners, do you sometimes just download the podcast, available on all good podcast platforms as well? Do you sometimes download it, just listen to the first 5 minutes and then next podcast?
Disregard the rest, yeah. Everyone wants to know what mundane thing happened in our life today. Almost got hit by a car walking. It was all good though.
Nice.
While walking my dogs, another dog was loose, and I returned that dog to the neighbor's house. But then the dog ran around in their backyard, and then they couldn't find the dog, and then he showed up in the house. So I guess they have a doggy door, and they didn't notice it. Notice him coming in, so that was fun. Good boy too. What else happened? Then it hailed really hard, and then it stopped hailing.
Very kind of spring weather, right?
Right, absolutely.
Spring showers.
We had some thunder clouds with patches of sun, but nothing crazy happened.
Wow.
Anyway, how about you, Matty? What mundane thing happened?
It rained.
Did it rain? It rains there a lot.
Yeah.
At your latitude.
But I was just thinking that it's looking nice and bright outside, etc., etc., and then yeah, it rained.
Nice. How long do you know when were the British Isles first populated by humanity? Do you know?
Oh.
Was that a Neolithic thing? Or was that a Neolithic thing, or were we there before then?
Oh. Well, I mean, obviously they used to be all joined up, right? And then it broke into a thing.
Sure, with the sea levels and all that. Yeah, but we've been sailing way before the agricultural revolution, though.
Oh yeah. I think it's. Let's say old.
The channel wouldn't be that difficult. It's like a hop, skip, and a jump. At the most narrow point. Anyway.
This is one of the worst preambles ever. I feel I've let the side down though, because I haven't really contributed much.
Wow. So, a jawbone was discovered in Devon at Kent's Cavern in 1927, which was redated in 2011 to 41,000 to 44,000 years ago. That's great. That's awesome. That doesn't mean that person's lineage survived. There could have been other waves, but that's still very interesting. You find that interesting?
Yes, fascinating. Dr. McNuggets. Dr. McNuggets has come into the chat, and they've been bringing some heat. So first of all, late start because Matty hip drop tackled Griffin, and then Dr. McNuggets saying, "Actually, I don't think we can put that. I think that's being sensitive." Anyway, it's funny though. Right, should we start the show on that note?
Hit it, Matty.
Lloyd, very quick. Lloyd saying Griff seems way more interested in British history than Matty. Well, first of all, Lloyd, I'm a history graduate, so let's just chill out for a second there. Second of all, Lloyd, it's 2:20 a.m. here, and third and finally, Lloyd, this is all old hat to me. Griff's just discovering this live on air. He's Wikipedia.
I just discovered England just recently. You've known about it for a long time.
Ricardo asking how old is Stonehenge? Yeah, it's old. It's old. Yeah.
It's not that old. It's like 2,500 years old.
Oh, right. Yeah. Great.
Not that old.
Should we do this thing?
Yep. Hit it.
Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where Griffin and I are going to dive into the 2024 NFL owners meetings. We didn't hear from Jody Allen. She did attend the owners meetings, but we didn't have a press appearance from her, not like Jerry Jones. But we did hear a lot from Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald and President of Football Operations John Schneider. We're going to dive into all of that stuff. They spoke a lot. The quotes aren't publicly available in terms of there's no video released or audio, which would be nice, but thanks to the work of the various beat reporters down there, Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times, Brady Henderson of ESPN, Corbin Smith of, I think it's called All Seahawks still, and John Boyle of Seahawks.com, and Mike Dugar of The Athletic, I have collated various quotes that we're going to be able to, first of all, read out, look at, some fancy graphics too, and we're going to also be able to analyze them, see what our takeaways are from all of this. Are the Seahawks melting down, etc., etc. Griff, anything stand out to you first? Where do you want to take this?
Well, I mean, lots stand out, but do you just want to go in order of what how you have the cards queued up?
we can do this any way you want.
It's your show.
Well, first of all, major news, Griff. Bob Condotta with I believe, Seattle Times exclusive that rumors of new uniforms for the Seahawks this year are unfounded. Condotta reporting that was vehemently denied at league meetings. Great word. But the Seahawks are going to stick in 2024 with the four that they had in 2023. Home, road, throwbacks, and action green. Condotta believing they're going to wear two throwbacks this season, one action green uniform. Griff, massive, absolutely massive there.
Yeah, you pronounce the H vehemently. I didn't know that.
Hey, look.
No,
I do. I don't think I should. It's my vocabulary is difficult.
No, be you, Matty. That's totally fine. I'm not dogging it. I'm simply saying, oh, it's not bad.
It's not my fault that Bob decided to put a word like that in there, is it?
No, of course not. It's totally fine that you pronounce it vehemently. That's totally fine.
I'm about to do something.
Anyway, I mean, Matty, do you want to talk about the uniforms, or do you want to keep talking about how you pronounce vehemently?
Well, I just wondered if are you okay with there only being one action green game?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I still miss the wolf gray, but I really like the alternate.
Right,
blue,
the wolf gray
blue.
Was nice.
So,
although the wolf grey, whenever I think of that, makes me think of like Marshawn Lynch, like covered in dirt and grass. So I guess it's good that,
Yeah.
It will never be the
The
same.
wolf grades were great, I thought. Anyway, um, I mean, what do you think? What do you think about the action green?
It's very bright. Right, let's move on to more important things here.
Next.
First off, we got a better idea of the type of team that Mike Macdonald wants. Now, chat, this overlay, I think we're going to disappear. So you may view that as a good thing. But for those in the chat who like seeing us, I can only apologize. Also, feedback on this graphic is welcome. It took me about 2 minutes, so maybe we can scale it up. Anyway, here we go. Mike Macdonald saying on mentality, we're going to line up every week expecting to win, and if you do that, you're going to win a championship. So that's where my mentality is. We're getting ready to go play a football game, even though it's 3 or 4 months out, and whoever lines up across from us, we're expecting to win that matchup. If you don't have that mentality, you're not going to get very far in this league. Griff, it's going to be tough this season for them to win a lot of games. I mean, it was telling to me that when he was asked a follow-up of if he felt the roster was capable of winning every Sunday, Macdonald replied, yeah, that's a tough question to answer. And how they're sort of working out what they're good at, how it's going to fit, how they're going to grow as a team. And the focus right now is getting the team to come together, spend time with one another, bond, and then talking about having each other's back so that the adversity of December and January, all the football stuff happens and they've built their team. But he finished saying, absolutely, the sky's the limit for this football team. Obviously, it's early. I mean, do you expect him to say anything else here? I think it's interesting how similar that is to Carroll in some ways.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of coaches give similar lines, right? But Carroll, what's Carroll's version of that? Want to know every week, championship mentality every week, right? It's his messaging and wording that I think we're going to hear a lot of, and it flows from his personality in an authentic way. But the message is the same. The delivery is a little different because it's him. He's not Pete Carroll. But the message is the same of high expectations and expect you're going to win, and like anything, something good can happen, right? So it's familiar, I think, for good reasons. It's you kind of want to hear that. I mean, you want to hear, you just got to put your best effort forth and whatever, So I don't know. How did you take that? Is there anything to deduce from it?
No, but the mindset of getting everyone together is something which kind of showed up afterwards as well. He kind of told the reporters how he's still planning his first speech to the team and how he's going to try and paint a picture of where we're going and get everybody on the same page so that we can rock and roll. And admitting that, the OTAs are voluntary, the minicamp stuff is as well, right? But and how they're not going to probably have 100% of the attendance, but how he's going to interlace these messages throughout of building the team together and a strong foundation. So, I mean, he said all the right things, really. There's, other than the kind of silence on Geno Smith, in which came off as, non-committal and then led to questions, not just from us, but from like everyone about what was going on there. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong of him. There's probably a purpose to that, but I don't think that's wrong with him. I think this is just a continuation of him. Everything he said is lining up. And it's like, yep.
Yeah.
Almost in a boringly consistent way where, I mean, I think what was exciting about this type of stuff is he started talking a bit more football. He obviously is a big, he's a coach, right? So it's hard for him not to talk about football, but he's known as this schematic guy. So it's kind of cool in the rest of the answers that we're going to look at how he's talked a bit more ball, because it's almost so predictably
right
football coach and good football coach that it lacks a bit of that flavor maybe. But yeah, this is par for the course.
Right.
Okay, so defense or offense? Where do you want to take it?
Let's go defense, the good stuff.
The good stuff. So, Seattle, their defensive front, it's a thing. McDonald's made some additions. Obviously, they signed Leonard Williams in free agency. It was the move that they prioritized in the free agency window. 3-year, $64.5 million contract. They also signed Jonathan Hankins, the Dallas Cowboys interior guy, veteran player. Signed not for much money, but it seems like a pretty bolstering move, getting a 320-pounder on the interior. McDonald spoke a bit more about how he feels about the defensive front moves. He said, "I'm really excited about the guys we brought in. I'm really excited about the guys on the roster. If the right opportunity presents itself to make us better, we won't hesitate to pull the trigger. But I think we're going in, we're very confident in the guys we have. We have some position flexibility, more so than we might have had in the past. Being able to change up some fronts with the same personnel on the field will be exciting. Guys that can play multiple spots across the line will have some cool combinations of people on the field at the same time. That'll be fun to figure out with AD as we go. He's got some cool ideas we'll experiment with as we get rocking. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of talent up there."
Yeah, it is their best position group after receiver, I think, at D-line.
Yeah, you said that on the previous podcast, and I hadn't thought of it that way. But then when you look at the resources they've got there, even if I keep trying to mock draft them 2 interior defensive linemen in like the top 50 picks on the simulators, it clearly is the standout position.
Right. And so, I like that he clearly feels confident. That the one thing that that sticks out to me is talking about with the same personnel and being able to switch up the fronts, the front versatility. And what that offers the defense, because as if you think about it, as offenses change their offensive formation, they introduce new gaps into the core. They remove gaps from the core, meaning from the line of scrimmage. They want to shrink you down, they want to expand you, etc. Well, you want to be able to mirror that. You want to have the defensive equivalent. So kind of like when we talked last year when we were watching Keon White, we were talking about how if he's on the field, you can run a bare front with him because he can play legit 3 technique. But then if you want to walk out one of the outside linebackers to go cover a slot and you want to get an even front to get pass rushed so that edge has a better angle, well, Keon White can also rush the edge like he's 270 instead of 290. So So not that they necessarily have that player, but it's the same logic of with the same guys, you can get out of a pass rush front what you want. You can get out of a run defense front what you want, and you can be flexible. And I think the flexible guys that you think of that come up, to mind right away are probably like Draymond Jones and Mike Morris and stuff. And not that they are the perfect archetype for what we're talking about, that they still can kind of be like schematic linchpins, if you will, within this specific thing that he's talking about. But I think it still extends out. Like Jaron Reed can play 3 technique, or he can play 1 technique, right? Leonard Williams can do quite a few things. So I like that he's got that mindset of wanting to be versatile in his front usage. He certainly was in Baltimore. Seattle hasn't been a stranger to being versatile in their front usage either. So, it's kind of like a nothing statement, but at the same time, it's also emphasizing football truths of like, it's important to be versatile, and they're going to always be coveting players that can allow them to live in different front worlds with the same personnel grouping.
Yep. And, you mentioned those names as guys who pop out as versatile, but it was interesting to me, and again, similar time of year when they're having discussions between coaching staff and front office, but Schneider mentioned in one of his radio interviews, Leonard Williams' ability to play anywhere from 0 to 5. And how he can move around the front. And they're clearly kind of coming up with these ideas. Again, if you think about when he's talking about the front flexibility, I've got it right here in front of me and I can't find the exact term. Anyway, when he's talking about all that stuff, if you remember my article that I did on the defensive fronts that McDonald ran in Baltimore and what I presume will largely continue in Seattle, there's no reason it wouldn't. It's kind of what he knows, and there's a bit of everything which suits, But Brent Urban played in base. He played like the 4-tech 4-eye to the tight end side, but then in nickel and in an under front look. Then in nickel and an over front, they have a way of like reducing down the end to the tight end and playing him in a 6 technique. We're basically talking about what Michael Bennett did in Seattle when they were really damn good, although he'd play more of a 5, not a head up on the tackle in under. But we're just getting it from like a Brent Urban type who's taller, longer, less dynamic, more of a 2-gapper. Not that Bennett couldn't 2-gap, but less of a gap shooter, more of a kind of stay and play type dude. And I think Seattle, how Mike Morris gets used is a really interesting question mark, because obviously he bulked up to be that bigger edge type last year, got hurt, injury, kind of redshirted almost. He played outside back with Macdonald in 2021, like edge all the time. Do they try and mix him in inside? I know Draymond Jones was a disappointing addition last year, really, if you look at the financial cost of that and the way that move was hyped up in the offseason. Does he then become, if he's not traded, because they have a lever to pull in the offseason in terms of if they wanted to trade him, they could, I think if it's post June 1st, they could free up $11.5 million, and they're tight up against the cap right now. I think they've only got $2.4 million in cap space, like the least in the league, I believe. But they could restructure as well. But if Jones does remain on the roster, and it would seem a bit early to move on from him, especially with what you're hoping he can be, how do they use him? Do they use him as this big edge and whatnot? And then the addition of Hankins, which was credited to obviously the Dirty influence. John Schneider told Brady Henderson that Dirty lobbied hard for Jonathan Hankins because, their time together in Dallas. Schneider described him as a good player, veteran, knows how to literally play a position, read blocks, super instinctive, just a really balanced, aware player. Well, Hankins, he can play that nose tackle spot, but that's not just a 0-tech head up on a center, though he could do that. But I know in Dallas he played a lot of 2-eye on the inside shoulder of the guard, which is the type of nose tackle Seattle will use in nickel, which Macdonald ran 79% of the time in Baltimore, and the vast majority of those snaps were nickel over fronts, where there's a nose and a 3-tech, occasionally 2 3 techniques. But also Hankins frees up Reed to move around, as you've sort of spoke about, Griff, and maybe possibly Williams as well. So interesting to hear Macdonald speak about all of that stuff. Anything else, Griff?
No, nothing else.
So
not even a little bit.
He then emphasized the importance of the middle of the defense. So he said it's still coming together, but the middle of the defense is really, really important. You need a strong spine, and we're excited about the guys we have. Guys that I haven't coached yet, but watching them on tape and the relationships that some of our coaches have with them, feel really strongly about it, and I think we'll be really strong up the middle. And then he mentioned how if you don't have that, offenses are just going to gas you right up the middle. That's the quickest distance from point A to point B, which you're trying to avoid. But in general, we are trying to build a wall up the middle, trying to stay square, trying to set hard edges, make the ball do that, go outside, make them throw the thing outside. You don't want to get gashed up the middle of your defense. You've got to have the right guys who can play right there so you can get the job done. All common sense.
All
right?
Common sense. But I love to hear him emphasize that, because, and I don't really think there's a wrong way. You need talent everywhere. But when people kind of pontificate about like, well, how do you build your team? It's often, you start on the edges and stuff. But like, I've never known a good team to be weak up the middle either. I've also never known a good team to be. I've never known a good team to be, poor on the edge either as well. So again, it goes back to, well, you got to just be good everywhere. But I like that he's emphasizing the middle of the defense, because you don't really hear that being emphasized so much. And it's not just the defensive line, right? It's not just the interior of the defensive line, but it's through the linebackers and the safeties. That's where you defeat structure. You make your highlight plays on the edge and on the perimeter, but you defeat structure by the integrity of the middle of your defense for the most part. And again, those are both oversimplifications. But you need to have really good players there, right? And so, I mean, he knows that the aggregate talent in the middle of the defense, maybe with the exception of the interior defensive line, is not scraping what he had in Baltimore. I mean, he knows that, but he also likes these players, I'm sure. And a lot hinges on the draft. So, and he knows they're not done as well. But I like that he emphasized that. I like that he likes the players that they have. I mean, of course, he likes them. It's just, well, what are the limits? What are the ceilings? It remains to be seen. I don't think he thinks that he's got all the guys yet. And of course, how could he? It's just his first year, and they made some pretty substantial decisions, tough decisions, but for the sake of a long-term picture here. But Matty, what did you take from that quote?
Yeah, well, on top of what you've said, it just reminds me as well, talking about how the guys can mix around and the strength up the middle and all that type of stuff. In Baltimore, other than Madubuike, who exclusively played the more one-gapping 3 technique spot, and then Pierce, who I always forget his first name. I think it's because his last name is a first name in some names.
Michael Pierce.
Michael, yeah. Michael Pierce, who exclusively played nose, really. Sometimes they played with 3 techniques and a wide front, so he'd play 3 technique because there's no nose. But other than those 2 who basically played the one role, they got the versatility out of Travis Jones, Broderick Washington. There's another guy I'm blanking on. Anyway, those guys played a bit of N, so a bit of the 2 gapping, and they played a bit of 3 technique in base, a bit of the 1 gapping stuff. Then when it came to nickel and you needed to rest Michael Pierce, and he played quite a few snaps, but when they needed to rest Michael Pierce, they plugged and played the interior. Like, they'd play one as a nose, one as a 3 on one snap, and then one would play nose, one would play 3 on the other snap. But both Jones, Washington, and the guy I'm stupidly blanking on, they played the nose and the 3. So I think we're going to see that all happen. And yeah, it's cool that Dirty's getting, it makes sense, but it's cool that the cool ideas, I'm curious, and I will be attempting to do a bit of a spot the difference of, are those cool ideas that he referenced from Dirty, the defensive coordinator, are they more kind of, we could use this person in this way, in this package? Or is he is he already comfortable having, schematic input? Are we going to be able to play spot the difference when it comes to the actual concepts? There's only so many ways of doing it, obviously, and I think the NFL in general is moving to, if you can do it, play your best, most dynamic 4, which sounds obvious, but in the past, there might have been more kind of prototypical, no, this guy must play inside, no, this guy must play on the edge, but now it's kind of, whereas you'd have your NASCAR best pass rush package in the past, now it's like, well, let's just get our best package of runs, people for this type of offense on the field if we can, and we'll work the alignments into a way of doing that.
Right. Especially if you consider him moving into the division where away from spread teams in the AFC and more, 12 personnel, 21 personnel in the NFC West.
Yeah, but more base might be a necessity.
Yeah. Either more base or mimicking the effects of base via the play call and nickel,
Yeah, moving the front, moving guys around.
Right.
Playing that like a... like you were referencing, Griff, how, you can reduce a guy down, play him inside a tackle, and make things work. Okay, chat, let's chill out on the wall stuff. I don't think Mike Macdonald was building a wall in that sense.
Jody Allen's paying for it. She is paying for it.
She is. That is a factual fact. Factual fact. Right. Next up, blitzing. So Mike Macdonald's arrival in Seattle, his ability to get pressure with just 4 rushers, but often, one guy is dropping from the line, one guy's rushing. Maybe it's a less typical dropper and a less typical rusher exchanging their stuff. But he ran simulated pressures quite a bit. But he spoke about every player on the defense needing to be able to do that. So if you want to play defense for us, you've got to be able to blitz, man. Whatever your one-on-one is, we expect you to win. We carry a team pass rush mentality. It's not going to be built around one guy. It's prudent to let everyone have a chance to win on any given play. But if you're going to blitz from off the ball, we expect you to win one-on-one. Those guys are going to hone their craft and figure out what moves work best for them. And when the matchups are in our favor, hopefully we're going to take advantage of those things.
Yeah. Again, more just like what we talked about. But so, I mean, he's setting the table, like when he said he's still crafting what his speech is going to be like to his players and stuff. I wonder if he'll include that. Like, it's all about the ball, right? It's every one of you guys better be able to blitz. So that's, and now obviously, like, they were a successful blitzing team in the past in terms of like getting their numbers, like getting pressure numbers and sack numbers, hits on the quarterback when they did it. But I mean, we've never gotten this kind of messaging from the head coach before talking about blitzing, and I'm curious to see, of course, how will that translate to on the field product if kind of, verbiage shows up in a concrete, tangible way. Obviously, it's coming from a defense where they were good at blitzing, whether it was still, the sim pressures where you're rushing 4 or only rushing 5 instead of like a true blitz, like rushing 6 or 7. But still, it's probably just a quote that we're going to be hearing on repeat from here all the way through the season.
Yeah, and to be fair, in Baltimore, if they have a pressure in the call sheet, I think he tries to get it in, called in the game at least once every 2 games maybe. And the example I'll use for that is there's a blitz they have where they send both outside corners, so the left outside corner and right outside corner. Consider how crazy that is, because those guys are covering the outside receivers. And, an offense could reduce their spacing down. They could tighten those outside receivers to the formation, so you have less of a way to go. But generally, those outside corners have, especially if one's to the field, the wide side of the field, they have a long way to go to blitz, which is why teams often don't do that. But Macdonald was asked about this, I think it was after the 49ers game, because they did it. Purdy tried to sight adjust and throw a little hot route. It got tipped up and it was a pick. And Macdonald was asked, like, when he kind of decides about it, I think it became a hot topic for the Ravens because I think they had maybe back-to-back weeks of success doing it. And he basically said it in the terms of, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was like he has to, establish the blitz, establish each type of blitz, because an offense has to believe you're going to do it. Otherwise, all of his showing pressure at the line and backing out, all of having corners pressed up at the line as though they could blitz, or they could just play press man, or they could play press cloud or press technique, whatever. But they could come on a blitz. You just have to keep the protection honest and make them think more and more about these things. And then ultimately, if you're going to eventually blitz every position almost, well, then you need them to be good at it when their number's called. And that does show up. Like, again, watching that 49ers game, but Patrick Queen just beats Christian McCaffrey one-on-one on the edge. If he doesn't do that, the Ravens' coverage down the field, the weak hook is beat by the bender route from the final 3. That's his responsibility, but he's just playing with zone eyes. He sees Purdy's in trouble. He doesn't look for that route. He doesn't robot it. He doesn't turn and run with it. It's Roquan Smith. But, well, he would have been the hot of 3 because I think they sent 5. I digress.
I think it was rush 4, that play.
Was it? Okay, never mind. Anyway, there's a few of Roquan not roboting for whatever reason. But the point being, I was very impressed with Patrick Queen's ability to beat blocks one-on-one. And I was also, impressed with their corners' ability. They just blitz with a violence and intensity. And so what you can expect in Seattle is, you're going to blitz probably Devon Witherspoon a bit more than you'd blitz Reek Woolen or whoever's starting opposite him, because that's not a given. You might blitz certain guys more, but everyone is going to get their number called at some point, and if they're not good at it, they won't play. And so it was interesting hearing Macdonald phrase it like this. It also gets me thinking about what is the mentality going to be of the defense in year one. As we have theorized in the past, but it reminded me of that, are they going to come in trying to really establish the blitz from day one and actually send 5 or more a bit more often than they did last year, and then scale it back, because it's kind of setting out your stall, and you have to choose a starting point schematically on defense? Or will they continue with their rush 4 rates and the simulated pressures anyway?
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. And then how does he? What is it? How whatever he arrives on, is it for the things you said, and how much is it? Well, I don't feel like I have the coverage players to really drop 7 that frequently, So do I end up blitzing more just out of virtue of that fact? Could be a lot of things. Could be very interesting year one, especially with how the draft goes. Like, I think there are decent players in the back 7, but you still need the guys that can do the hard stuff. And I just don't think there's enough of them yet. So how he schemes around that, how he schemes with different assumptions, because like a lot of the cool stuff he did in Baltimore was he could do them based off of certain assumptions he had. Like, well, if I do this, it's because this other player can compensate there because he's Kyle Hamilton, right? He can handle that. Marcus Williams can handle that. Roquan Smith can handle that. You know what I mean? There aren't enough guys yet to lean on. Like, you can do that somewhat with like Rayshawn Jenkins because he's a competent, solid starter, right? But he's not wowing you per se. He's just giving you a high floor. So yeah, I'm curious to see what the scheme looks like with all that in mind.
Yep. So, inside linebackers. This was interesting, and I think Griff will have a lot of comments on this one. So, obviously, Seattle signed. Well, they let Jordan Brooks leave in free agency. Maybe they had wanted to try and give him a second offer, maybe not. And they signed for, significant year one cap hits, really, but less money, obviously. And we've covered it before, but they signed Jerome Baker from the Dolphins and Tyrell Dodson from the Buffalo Bills. Macdonald spoke about those players. I think there's position flexibility, and both guys have played both spots. Jerome's played in several different types of defense, and then Tyrell's played both the Mike backer and the weak side backer in Buffalo, and he's done it at a high level in my opinion. But 2 guys that can run, 2 intelligent football players, tough. I thought they're both good tacklers, they're both good players in space, and those are things we're asking from our inside backers. Those guys have got to take up a lot of ground, man. They've got to play people out of the backfield. They've got to play all the choice routes on the weak side, which is hard to do. I think we've got the right guys for the job. They've got to blitz, play man-to-man. We ask a lot out of our inside backers, so it'll be a great battle, and we'll see how it comes to life. But I think there's some opportunity there to have a little bit more position flexibility than I think maybe you saw in Baltimore.
Interesting. That very last sentence is very interesting, isn't it? I think there's more opportunity there to have a little bit more position flexibility. So I feel like what that means really is him saying, like, because we don't have a guy that can be, presently anyway, we don't have a guy that can be a full-time Mike. We're going to have to like jigsaw this whole thing together. I think he's kind of hinting at limitations, really, is how I take that. Limitations of individual players. Now, if again they draft the Mike of their dreams, if that guy's even in this draft, then whatever they'll do will just be because the guy's a rookie and they don't want to put too much on him, or they think he can handle it, right? But so like they've got to be able to blitz. We know that play man to man. If we're talking like pure cover one, Well, the linebacker, when we hear man to man, we think, oh, coverage, right? Cover, cover, cover. But like in pure cover one, the linebackers have the easiest job in the world. They're just funneling the back. If the back goes out, I take him out to the flat. Rarely are linebackers in true man coverage calls tasked with difficult things. Mm-hmm. And it's more so like in zone coverage.
Sorry, Griff.
Yeah.
Especially with how prevalent nickel defense is. Like back in the day, it used to be that a linebacker could get matched up on a safety, but now usually that's a linebacker matched up on a safety. That would be bad defense. A linebacker matched up on a tight end, but now it's usually the safety handles the tight end, then the nickel handles the slot.
Right. So, but then also when he's saying man on man to man, like could he also be talking like, well, when you have matching assignments within zone because they take on a man technique, right? And that to me is really like, I think to us is like the really like difficult stuff that linebackers find them in the positions to be in, right?
That being said, if it's quarters, it can be a bit, or like, you know, type of match quarters, it can be a bit easier on a linebacker, less space, less, you know, less of like room to have to run, more just kind of scanning and processing, thinking like a 3-2 read in the low hole, that sort of thing.
Right. True. Very true. And so, I mean, he's given us some words, but he's also, you know, he's given us nothing at the same time, right?
Come on, he talked choice routes on the weak side, Griff. You can't get mad at that.
Those are tough to cover.
Yeah, but Griff, that's what you were. Is that not what you were saying was flat defender play, which is worthless?
That kind of flat defender play is a little more, you know.
Oh, okay. So there's different types of flat defender players there.
If you're playing like a curl zone, you got to actually play that route right. Whereas if you're just playing the flat, you know, into quarters, like if it breaks inward, you're not as responsible, you know.
What if it's 3-by-1? You're on the weak side.
Well, you're not getting the weak side choice route, the 3-by-1.
Unless it's Christian McCaffrey.
And he flares out, or he's running the weak side from the backfield. Yeah, no, that's tough. So with that said, he's deciding to put Baker at will, right? Maybe he thinks Baker has the feet for that.
I mean, looking at their defense, I think Baker is a good fit in that queen role. You know, you're going to match him on the back occasionally. You're going to ask him to handle like a McCaffrey choice route, which ultimately you need a bit of pressure there as well. You're going to add him on to rushes a lot when it's like the formation allows for it. And you're going to, I don't think he's a Mike. But, and then, again, you know, it's good to see they're synced up with the front office because he's mentioning similar things about inside backers that Schneider did. But that's what stood out to me about Dodson. He can just run and he can hit. And he's kind of physical going downhill. And so in terms of like the run fit sense of the Mike, what you need from a Mike in a run fit sense, even though he's not the heaviest, he's very dense because he's quite short. And like I said, he can run and he can hit. And he takes up a lot of the ground. Coverage-wise, it could be a bit ropey. I think they will find ways not to ask too much of him. But also, they're going to draft at least one backer. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now, the green dot. So, it's been mentioned, Tyrell Dodson has been a green dot player. Jerome Baker has been in Miami as well. But on the green dot, Mike Macdonald said, it depends. Not sure who is going to wear it yet. We'll figure out how we communicate. I'm sure we will experiment. In Baltimore last year, we really had Roquan wear it all the time, even in practice, just so the communication streams were consistent. Everybody knew that he was the guy with the info that you had to go to. But the year before, Chuck Clark wore it at the safety spot. Eric Weddle has worn it. CJ Mosley has worn it. We'll figure out how it goes. And then guys want to be talked to differently throughout the game. Chuck was a guy who just wanted the call and wanted to go play ball. And Rowe was a guy who wanted some more information. So, however those guys feel they're going to go play the best and we can get the call out there the most efficiently, that's how we will roll.
Considerations there. So obviously with Roquan Smith being a middle linebacker, and him coming in late to the team, right, the year before, it made sense. They're not just going to take the green dot off of Clark and give it to Roquan. But at the same time, they didn't give it to his predecessor, Mike. So clearly they want to give it to a player that they think is good. Right?
You're not going to take off the field much.
Right, and a guy that's going to stay on the field. So if you have a hole at middle linebacker, well, Dodson's technically the starter, but it feels as though they're going to draft one, right? If they do draft one and he supplants Dodson, I doubt that. I don't know. Do they want to put that pressure on a rookie? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. It feels like it's going to end up going to a safety. So either Rayshawn or maybe even Julian Love.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, like, just reading that comment and observing it, how it sounds like they're going to really kind of just wait and practice and see who's looking good and then who's good at it and who's, it's not just who's playing well, but it's also who teammates kind of gravitate towards and trust on the field. Like Monjomo in the chat suggesting Jaron Reed. I mean, that could be something. Uchenna Nwosu could do it because if he's as good as he was last year before he got hurt, where he's a really good run player, amazing run instincts, and then pass rush, he's bringing it. Well, you could in theory give it to someone like that. You might want someone a bit more off the ball, but yeah, could be anyone. But it's just interesting that it could be anyone. Nice to read that, but I'd be shocked if it's Tyrell Dodson.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Dodson hasn't been a full snap player once in his career, I just don't think that makes sense yet. So,
okay. So it could be one of the safeties, and obviously Seattle has made some moves at safety. Kayvon Wallace, Rayshawn Jenkins, both new safeties. Quandre Diggs gone, Jamal Adams gone for now. Maybe we'll talk about him in a second. But before that, Macdonald spoke about Jenkins and Wallace and what they bring to the defense. He said, I like that they're really tough football players. You turn the tape on and these guys play the right way. Talking to them and people that have coached them, I think they're really smart. So I think they'll be able to handle all the stuff we're going to ask them to do and spit all the calls out. It comes down to position flexibility, so you're not just putting guys pigeonholed into roles. We'll see what they do best at, how they complement one another, see how they work together. But I think it gives us some flexibility to possibly be in some 3 safety sets based on how it shakes out at nickel. Then we'll kind of go from there. Both guys can play man-to-man. They can play deep area of the field. Rayshawn played deep with them more than you'd expect last year. Rayshawn has even moved down into the box in the second level too. I think we have a lot of different skill sets we're bringing to the table up the middle. Combined with our corner situation, I think we're in a good spot.
I mean, what did you take from that?
Well, I think it's not the first time, but he's mentioning players who can do a bit of everything. And when you go back to the linebacker comment about how Baker had played in a lot of different defenses and how Dodson had done a bit of Mike and weak side backer, and then you read here about how he's saying Rayshawn playing deeper. The Ravens ran basically every coverage, a bit of every coverage. They have various coverage tools to, you can run cover 4, but then you can run cover 4 with different checks to make it look a bit more like man, to better cover the 2 and the 3, to bracket the number 1, to do all this different stuff, right? There's different tools to build in the coverage. They clearly value versatility from these players and multiplicity, and I think it's something where in college, there might be a really traitsy guy, but if they haven't seen him in a variety of looks, then they're going to be troubled by that. I mean, when we watched Kayvon Wallace and we shared our impressions of him in the free agency reaction podcast that we did on him and Jenkins, we said how Wallace did a bit of everything. We said how at Clemson he'd have been doing a bit of everything, and that might even have hurt his development just as a technically sound, fundamental football player. Jenkins, I was saying how he played a lot deeper than, he played mainly deep for them when I watched him, and that's kind of what Macdonald's mentioning, but interesting to know he played a bit more down earlier in his career. So when it says both guys can play man-to-man, I was shocked going back over the Ravens tape after certain charting companies, suggested that they played about 6 snaps of man a game. I saw maybe 2 or 1. A lot of it's match, like 3 match or even just cover 4, like really aggressive cover 4 where you're almost man matching. I don't think those guys are going to be mainly in man assignments. And yeah, the 3 safety sets is similar to Seattle last year, obviously, when they had Jamal Adams planned as the big nickel, but yeah, it's less like that linebacker type. None of those guys are that big. It's more just that could be the best way you match up with teams.
Right. They clearly have it in mind that Jenkins is going to have to play some deep half, some deep quarter. They also like his ability to play down in the box too, so it gives them versatility. I'm really curious to see if it's those 3, Love, Jenkins, and Wallace, getting most of the snaps at safety, who ends up playing what, or if there's really like a true rotation going on where anyone can be down, anyone can be deep, any one of the 3 could be the quote unquote big nickel. Curious what that will look like. It's really a case of kind of having like 3 boundary safeties, kind of boundary down safeties, I don't know. It's intriguing. I'm curious to see what Macdonald will do with them, and like there will be so much commentary on what he thinks each guy's precise best thing is based on how he uses them, if he doesn't use them entirely interchangeably, right?
Yeah. And in Baltimore, they did experiment when they were in their 3 safety looks with, even in like 3rd and 4, right? They'd show 3 high safeties at the snap. They'd all be high, and then they'd play a variety of shells from that. Could be they do that kind of disguise a bit more to prevent those guys getting in like obvious pre-snap isolated one-on-one matchups, because they're more safety body types. And while Macdonald praised their ability to do a bit of man-to-man, I don't think it's something you want them to major in. And I also don't think you want them to be in man-like situations where it's really obvious before the snap. I think when he talks 3 safety stuff like that implies to me that continuing the 3 high stuff that they dabbled in last year. I'll try and post an example of that on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So Jamal Adams' name came up. Schneider was asked about this too, and I mean, what's your read of this, Griff? Because to me, it comes off like they're being asked about it because Schneider mentioned it on the radio, and then it's become like a story which is fun to watch, and so they're not going to be like, nah, that guy's a bum, we're not going to sign him, but they kind of so they're just keeping it nice, but I don't actually know what the interest level would be. I mean,
right.
Macdonald said we'd love Jamal if it's the right opportunity. I think we'd jump at it. But like, they don't have much cap space. They're probably thinking vet min. Why would Jamal Adams do that? And
Right.
Macdonald saying how it's the linebacker skill set that they like, the double-digit sack type of guy, great blitzer, can play man-to-man, things like that. I mean, it sounds like a will or like a dime back, basically. Or it's the big nickel as well. You can mix him around a bit, but realistically, I don't think this is going to happen. What's your read?
Yeah, I agree. The only way I would see Jamal agreeing to a veteran minimum is his market. He only gets offers from teams he doesn't have any interest in playing in. He has some roots in Seattle, and he is still getting paid a bunch of money for them this year. I don't know what the actual cash flow is, but obviously he has a lot of guarantees left still. So I don't know. Maybe he'd be willing. Macdonald does go on to like he expands on his skill set. Like if he really wasn't interested, and it truly like even if he thought in his mind it's not likely, if he truly thought there was no chance, why would he, go on the way that he did? Maybe he's just in a talkative mindset. Maybe he just wants to do him a solid, to other people listening and in the league, like viewing him as a real player still. I don't know. But so, yeah, interesting comments. I mean, he does fit still. There is a role. And,
so it's like you could then, would you rather on the majority of your snaps have Jamal Adams next to Jerome Baker at Mike, or have Tyrell Dodson and Jamal Adams and Jerome Baker? So Dodson and Baker, or Baker and Adams?
Yeah, I mean, Baker and Adams is a little more enticing, right?
Yeah.
But then the other thing is like, well, I also kind of prefer Baker at will than at Mike himself, just if we're talking about Baker, and it would probably put you out of drafting a guy, maybe.
I think Adams brings a bit more as a weapon, but the price really has to be right. And then there's all the stuff of, I mean, with his movement, it was visibly impacting him, and he audibly like expressed how it was. What did he use? Grating, and then obviously he got shut down for the year. But it was clear it was hampering him. Now the suggestion with that injury was that year 2 would be like easier and it wouldn't hurt as much, but like that's a complete unknown as well. And it's just with all that's happened, it seems very unlikely.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Are you ready for the offense? There's a bit less on the offense, Griff.
Ready. Hit me.
I'll hit you. So there was a lot of comments on quarterback. The main thing is after Macdonald told Tom Pelissero of NFL Network about Geno Smith being the starter, and after Schneider said it as well, Macdonald then told the reporters, we'll see what Ryan, the offense coordinator, Ryan Grubb, thinks and what's the right split in terms of how they're going to work the Sam Howell, Geno Smith snaps. But then Macdonald said, Geno's going to go into camp. He's the starter. Really excited about that. But obviously Sam needs a lot of reps as well. We'll figure out the right mix. We might not be competing for 1 and 2, as in the number 1 quarterback, the number 2 quarterback. But those two guys are going to be getting after it every day to develop and bring the team along and compete with themselves to try to make them the best player they can be, and that's what we expect. Griff, I mean, that's reassuring about Geno Smith, right? But also in the, like I said, they're only kind of saying this now after the combine, after the early parts of off-season, after free agency, and maybe they were just fully focused on trying to recruit Drew Lock back, but they mentioned Drew Lock a bit and didn't really mention Geno, and it was weird and ambiguous. And it appeared there was the Adam Schefter report, which read almost like a solicitation for trade offers. So now Seattle may feel like this, but it's maybe, with what all that's happened, there's, we can't forget that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's Geno's the starter, Sam's the backup, and I think that I think it's best for Sam to think of himself as like, I'm the backup, and just get those reps in. Think of it as he's being invested in by the team. There's some long-term thought, long-term possibility there, and just kind of let reality take shape as it does, but I think for this year, it's the entire coaching staff is all in on Geno, and then reassess after the year and then see what they want to do with his 2025 cap hit.
So on the subject of Sam Howell, Griff, we kind of half jokingly mentioned Schneider's history with Brett Favre, who had a lot of interceptions, right?
Yeah,
and then Schneider, apparently, according to Brady Henderson, said he absolutely believes Howe can be a full-time starter again, and then had an interesting comment about how he was in Green Bay with a young Brett Favre who also threw a lot of interceptions. Schneider said, "I love the way he plays the game, Sam and Brett."
Yeah, I mean, Howell's got an arm. He's got an arm. He wants to put the ball downfield, right? He does put the ball in harm's way. But I mean, I'm totally agnostic about Sam Howell. I've got nothing. I'm not standing him. I'm not saying he can secretly be X, Y, and Z. Just wait and watch. But I'm also not saying he's terrible. He's horrible. He has a skill set. There are pros and cons there. He needs to not be a starter right now. He needs to just ride the bench, learn, get reps in, come up in a system as a young player, and then just take his preseason reps for what they are, have them in the back of our mind. And then if, he's in a training camp battle next year, then we'll take it from there. Right. But beyond that, Schneider doesn't think the world of him, obviously, based off of he didn't give up that much draft capital for him. I think it's just a prudent decision to be like, hey, can we recoup something here? And he wants to be active at his backup quarterback rostering, right? He hasn't been able to in the draft, so clearly he's getting a guy that they did value highly in the draft, or at least rate at all, right? But so it's and him comparing him to Favre is not him calling a shot, right? That's him. That's John Schneider saying, if he's going to succeed, we have to talk about him like he can succeed, right? Let's not make it a self-fulfilling prophecy by saying, well, he's never going to be Brett Favre. Okay, well, then what's the point? What are you going for? There's no harm, there's no risk in saying that, especially when you haven't invested that much in him.
So he's not going to be involved in a welfare scandal?
I certainly hope not.
No,
I certainly hope not. Or
yeah, or other things. You mentioned the arm. That's something that stood out to Macdonald as well. He said, obviously the arm talent's there, but the escapability, the ability to extend plays is just something that you respected going against him, that he was out there and battling. You put that together and his performance up in Seattle is something that I thought we made a pretty cool jump to go get him. I mean, interesting again that he's mentioning the performance in Seattle like Schneider did. And this is another example of how he's kind of singing from the same hymn sheet as Schneider. And they, at least publicly, are very much on the same page, which is an encouraging sign. He said on the move, I think it happened with John's experience and my experience playing against Sam. When you play quarterbacks, it's different on tape than it is when you go against them in person. And you felt the competitor. That was the biggest thing that stuck out in my mind. And that's someone you want on your football team, a guy that's going to go to battle. Schneider basically said the same thing on the radio. So,
right.
Cool. Okay, now an interesting comment here from Brandon Haddock. Did it not seem weird that Grubb went to Bo Nix Pro Day, then a day later they traded for Sam Howell? I don't think it's weird, but now you've mentioned that, Schneider said how when they heard Drew Lock was signing the Giants, they then looked at the draft and were like, well, that team's getting a quarterback, that team's getting a quarterback, that team's getting a quarterback, that team's getting a quarterback. So, that's Caleb Williams, that's May, that's Jaden Samuels, and then is it Jaden Samuels? Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels. And Michael Penix Jr., right? Potentially. Are they thinking by 16 the best guy left is Bo Nix? Or are they thinking that 16 is too rich and Bo Nix is the next guy who will be available to them when they do pick, and really they're not interested in people who can come in and be a backup? I don't know. Maybe there is something to that in that Bo Nix kind of was the next guy up, and they were like, "Nah, this guy's not interested. And the other guys aren't going to be available to us, really."
I mean, maybe, but a lot of other pro days of quarterbacks that could be in draft position for hadn't happened yet. I don't know. I feel like John will still be thinking about a quarterback in round X. Like if there's a guy there in round 4, he might just pull the trigger. You know, I'm not sure.
I saw Spencer Rattler ripping a dig with the rusher in his face, rapping over a curl defender.
Yeah, Rattler is interesting. I think Rattler could surprise and go in the first round.
You know, that throw that you tweeted out, Griff?
Yeah.
That throw is so brazen that it made me. I need to watch more and be like, is he like just throwing that like a nut job and not really like? Is that like a badly calculated risk, or is that just the guy who's playing out of his damn mind is cracked? You know, like it was just so brazenly like what?
His bad stuff is when he extends. Now he is mobile. He can work off platform and everything. But he's not at his best when he's trying to do too much outside the pocket. And then there are other times where I do think that when because he has some interceptions, he's not getting picked off because he's misreading the defense. I think it's the risk benefit analysis is off.
Yeah, so that then makes me look back at that throw and it's like,
But then he also has some wow throws where he gets them in there.
Yeah, right? Like that one. Yeah.
So I mean, if Spencer Rattler goes to Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, forget about it. Forget about it. Like it will be disaster. He needs to go to the AFC, in my opinion. And you know, I'm just afraid of him going to a team that the Seahawks will run into a lot that knows how to develop quarterbacks, or at least get the most out of what they are presently. Like, I don't know if Kyle Shanahan actually develops quarterbacks, but I think he gets the most out of whatever they are. Whereas Sean McVay might develop them. Matt LaFleur definitely develops quarterbacks, fortunately. But like if Spencer Rattler went to Green Bay and they didn't have Jordan Love, year 2, year 3 of Spencer Rattler, it's going to be a top 10 quarterback in my opinion. But then also, like, I feel like there's just such a high bust rate. That's why I'm really not trying to get too into the quarterbacks, because the more I watch of Rattler, the more I want to talk about him, like over Jaden Daniels. Just because he does too many.
Griff.
Yeah.
This is a very lazy thing to say, but trying to think of what a listener may ask. How is this guy ripping a dig different to the last guy you liked who ripped a dig? Desmond Ridder.
When Ridder rips a dig, he's still doing it well, though, in Atlanta. There's
okay.
So with Ridder, if you break down, like if you just assess his,
I don't need you to defend Ridder here.
I'm not defending him.
We've already done this. Do you remember that time? I knew you were going to do it.
The conversation, though, is about taking what someone does well in college and trying to project it, right?
Okay.
The things that Ridder did well in college have projected statistically. Like he's doing like pure dropbacks. His success rate is top 10. Like he's performing well. What I didn't account for, and it's a lesson learned, is that his negatives, while not showing up frequently, when they show up, they are extraordinarily negative.
Yeah, so, and it's mainly like play action, back turn to the defense stuff, right?
Yeah, and he didn't turn his back much. So, and I maybe Arthur Smith needed to live more in pistol instead of pure under center. I don't know, but it's odd that like Ridder is good at the hard stuff and bad at the easy stuff. That's peculiar. With Rattler though, like one, he's just simply has way more arm talent than Desmond Ridder. He can throw off platform. It's the decision making off platform with him, but he can throw off platform. But more importantly, Rattler can be moved off his platform and reestablish it in the pocket while still reading the defense and staying on time. And then he has a quick release too. But I mean, the actual throwing motion is high and tight. So like he honestly, like he probably has, easily the third best arm in the class if we're taking in all considerations: throw power, velocity, touch, accuracy, timing, anticipation. And then as far as process goes, like he has a process. He doesn't have an underdeveloped skill set. He just needs to refine the traits more. Like he's just a classic, like he's not a project. He just needs to be coached up. And the big concern with him is he coachable? Because there are like character concerns. Then the other thing is he's 6 foot. He's not 6'4". And if you're talking about a guy who doesn't wow you, but there's a lot to like, you typically want those guys to be hitting the size profiles. And he really is on the cusp for a lot of people not passing the threshold, right? But like, if he got his head on straight, there's an Aaron Rodgers-esque type of talent there. And that's what people were talking about him when he was at Oklahoma. He's the next Mahomes.
Well, and on the Aaron Rodgers point, personality-wise, I've heard some things that he may be a challenge.
I just realized how I said getting your head on straight, and then said you can Aaron Rodgers and playing.
Yeah,
Aaron Rodgers has his head on straight, but yeah.
So that would be a big one where it sounds like a very interesting tape, very interesting ceiling as well. But why didn't it work in Oklahoma? And it'll be very interesting interview-wise, the kind of background work done there and how he pans out in the NFL. And if the Seahawks do take a look at him. But thank you, Griff. That was very comprehensive.
Of course, Matty.
I really want to... Maybe a bit later on we can. Rattler is a good surname. I've got something we can do with that. Okay. Offense. We found out more about the Seahawks offense. Obviously, there is a new offensive coordinator in Seattle, Ryan Grubb of the Washington Huskies, or previously of the Washington Huskies. Macdonald was asked how this 2024 Seahawks offense will differ from 2023 and what Shane Waldron was doing. He said, well, I don't want to spill any trade secrets, but I think it's a little bit semantics. I think when you watch Ryan's offense at Washington, not saying we're going to do that exactly, but it's not in the roots of what the offense was last year. I think that's fair to say. Different kind of tree of offensive systems, and we'll see as it goes.
Yeah. When he says roots, what did your mind jump to? Because my mind jumped to like, well, there isn't the element of in the run game. It's not like wide zone and then
no, it's not wide zone. It's not under center. It's not boot.
Right. Or even like deep pocket play action.
Yeah.
But in the actual
there's
drop,
a bit,
like,
they add a bit of that, but generally it's gun. It's like it's quite the way they use the tight end or tight ends is quite old NFL-y. Well, not old NFL-y, but like 2000s NFL. But then they really get funky with. Well, then they have a more diverse run game, like the gap stuff, and then they have some wide splits, and then interesting ways of, and then a lot of motion and shifting, which that was not old NFL-y. So like the roots of the system almost remind me of like it almost looks kind of Patriots, 2007 Patriots stuff, but then with all the shifts and the motions and the stacks, and then gap run game wise, it does not that, the amount of pulling. Not that the Patriots didn't run gap.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you see that?
No, I kind of
get what you're getting at.
Well, I mean, there's the choice routes, there's the juke and jerk routes and stuff and everything. Yeah, that is fascinating. I mean, I do think there is some commonalities in the actual dropback game itself, at least the outside the numbers stuff. I mean, there's only so many ways you can use DK Metcalf, and obviously there's a lot of overlap there with Rome Odunze. So I think we still have questions over like how do they attack the middle of the field, but again, Penix turned some stuff down there. Grubb and DeBoer had more there at Fresno State. They brought in guys that have background with Sean McVay. So there's some continuity there in losing Waldron. So I don't know. I do like that he kind of came out and said that, though. Like he's actually kind of giving like a characteristic to it, instead of just saying we're going to build around what our team does best and try to find that out. He's actually he's relaying to us that there is a vision. Of course, we know there's a vision.
Well, and they've clearly been working their socks off. Hang on a second. Working their socks off. Would you use that expression?
I would use that expression.
Nice. They've clearly been working hard installing the schemes and the systems, and it's clear they've accelerated from where they were at, right? They'll have put in the stuff now, so he'll be familiar or more familiar than he was with it.
Indeed.
Yeah, the way that they motion and shift, that looks like Shanahan, although I'm sure Shanahan got aspects of that from like the cheat head start motion stuff. Washington was doing that in 2022 and 2021. Fresno State did certain stuff like that. So, I mean, we don't need to get into who started it, but it reminds me, of how the other McDaniel, the other Mike McDaniel with Miami does that stuff with Tyreek and stuff. But then the gun usage and the drop back game was more kind of old NFL-y. Well, not old, but pre Shanahan stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, I'm really excited to see what this looks like. Really am. There's only so many ways with Seattle's personnel, as you mentioned, Griff, you can do it. But I think we agree Geno's the type of quarterback who can do a bit of everything. So
True that.
Right. Finally, bit of news. John Schneider mentioned offensive line's obviously a spot they want to continue adding to. I think McDonald expressed similar. Guard is the clear spot. Laken Tomlinson, Dalton Reisner, two vets who are still unsigned. As I mentioned previously, Seattle doesn't have much cap space, but they could create more. There's various restructures they can do. They could also trade Draymond Jones. So, Griff, what do you think is going to happen at guard? Over 30 type of dude, or?
Yeah, it's hard to square those. Well, not, it's not hard to square, but in squaring those comments with also Schneider's comments about how on 710 about how guards get overdrafted and overpaid.
Yeah. Yeah, there might be a reason for that.
There might be. I'm surprised
because you have
that.
a steady guard there who is like solid to good, and yeah, you're not having to scrape around still.
Yeah.
You're surprised he said that? Is that what you're going to say?
That's not a good way to ingratiate yourself to.
No, that's what I meant by him being a bit kind of candid and oversharing, and in a way, who is it he does it with? It is Wyman and Bob, isn't it? Yeah. But the kind of laddie banter that those guys have, the fellas in the bar hanging out, that kind of seems to lead to Schneider sort of just saying stuff like that. Yeah. Felt unnecessarily strong. Why is he saying that?
Right.
But insightful. And you look at
subterfuge too.
Could be what? Sorry.
Could be subterfuge as well. Maybe.
Right. He's lying, and they're gonna take a guard at 16 overall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, interesting if you look at what Green Bay did all those years, the Ron Wolf thinking, but they had some stat like they hadn't taken a day one lineman in forever, and part of that was they had a tackle pairing for ages, right? But if you compare that to Seattle, not only does Schneider come from that GM tree, but Seattle in theory has the two offensive tackles in place. And so if Schneider thinking guards get overdrafted and overvalued from that kind of tree, and that's his philosophy and thinking, they may be kind of like Green Bay. And if they stop giving away picks, and they start keeping their picks a bit more, they may be able to take that kind of fourth round stockpile, rest them, ideally not have them play in the first year and then bring them in and play solid interior football. I think that's the way they want to do it. But right now, not having a starting left guard, having a question mark who needs pushing a right guard is something. Sounds like Ankram's going to compete for the right guard spot. Nick Harris is going to compete for the center spot. And Ankram also on the left side as well. So they need like another one, hence these comments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on injuries to Abraham Lucas, Schneider said how he expects both Lucas with that knee operation procedure that he underwent and Uchenna Nwosu coming back from his pectoral injury, which sadly ended his 2023 season far too early, week 6 I think it was. But he expects both those players to be ready for week 1, which is significant. And finally, Griff, on Monday, the NFL owners, it's really late. I can't read. They unanimously, nailed it, approved a proposal pitched by the competition committee prohibiting tackles where the defender wraps up an opponent and unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips on lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. So that's now going to be a 15-yard penalty, an automatic first down. Obviously, Twitter has gone mad with this, and there's been lots of takes, former players like JJ Watt, Richard Sherman speaking out against it. The previous week, the NFL Players Association opposed any attempt by the NFL to implement this rule because the NFL, while the NFLPA remains committed to improvements to our game with health and safety in mind, we cannot support a rule change that causes confusion for us as players, for coaches, for officials, and especially for fans. We call on the NFL again to reconsider implementing this rule, but they've gone and done it. NFL Executive Vice President Jeff Miller said that the league found 230 instances of the now outlawed swivel hip drop tackle, which was a 65% increase from 2022. You might want to ask why that number's gone up. Probably because other tackles are made harder, but anyway. And then Troy Vincent told reporters in a conference call that the technique had led to injuries at a 20 to 25% higher rate than normal tackles. So, Griff, what do you have an opinion on this before we read out McDonald's take? Are you outraged? Are they taking our game away?
I think it's a good move. Any move that's trying to improve player safety, I think, is good. But there's always going to be fallout with any decision that improves something because there's no perfect solution. And just because there's some negative impact doesn't mean, it's still not worth it in the aggregate. But there will be some high impact calls where someone gets called for it and it feels really ticky tack or really skirting, really pushing the limits of the rule, right? And it will impact the game probably. So we just got to brace for that, and everyone talking about it forever for a week or so.
I think it'll be it will be talked about week 1 of the preseason. There'll probably be loads of flags, and then it won't happen again until, I don't know, a big moment, and everyone will be like, what?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, Matty. I really want to know your thoughts on this, how defenders try to adapt to tackling guys from behind when they don't want to. They're trying to kill their momentum, right? So they drag their weight down with them to try to bring them down from behind or from the side. So obviously, the main thought is, rugby tackling, right? What do you think about that?
Well, it is interesting as well because if a guy's running, breaking away down the field, right, and you're making a recovery tackle, there's the only really way to do it, if he's like all the way down the field, right, is to jump on his back and pull him down like this hip drop style. Now you could try and go in from the side, but then what happens is because he's running at a lot of speed and you've got all this momentum going, you're probably going to have to put your head in front of the body, which is something that has been really, they've tried to stamp that out of the game because concussions. And if you watch rugby players who do make that type of tackle where they put their head in front in the recovery tackle mode, their head does get knocked around a bit. If you got a helmet on, that's going to be more, you might think that's protection. No, it's probably going to be more vicious impact for your head. So I just think it means those types of tackles are just very, very, very difficult. You could try and run and then just smash their ankles with your hands, swipe at their ankles and trip them up. But ultimately, it's a good thing. And I think there's a lot of other ways when it's not that type of specific scenario I mentioned where you can make the tackle well. The key for me is the implementation, obviously, but like here when this message that I read out said about landing on players' legs, like if that's what it is, like you're dropping your weight and then landing on the leg, that's absolutely good. Like that's very dangerous. But I've seen there's some other explanations I've read have differed. And then the other thing is, I need to find, I mean, that's the official definition that I found now, so we'll go with that. But the other thing is, I read the NFL saying that they thought these happen once a week, right? Which is fine. But then I saw another thing saying that it happens once a game. So the messaging is kind of being ballsed up already, which is not very encouraging when it comes to the implementation. Because are we, for instance, talking about 16... Sorry, not 16. There's only 8 games a week, isn't there? No. Yeah, there is 16 games a week because there's 32 teams, unless it's bye week. Yes. Are we talking about 16 more penalties, right? Or are we talking about 1 more penalty a week? It's quite a difference. So clearly just a mess up, but it would be nice to know.
Do they try to de-emphasize something else?
Well, that seems to be the way, right? And they still don't enforce lowering the head for running backs because that's what running backs do.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that rule.
Now, why we mentioned it is because Macdonald was asked on this. And his answer was interesting. He said, yeah, I think you're going to be able to adapt to it. You watch these plays, and it is a dangerous play, man. It's a maneuver that we got to get out of the game. It's too dangerous for the guys carrying the ball. I understand there's a lot of rules implemented on how we're playing defense in this league. It goes to how well we coach tackling again. It puts a premium on how our coaching is fundamental throughout for our team. Obviously, definitely not coaching anything close to that. But if the guys are doing it the right way consistently, I think they'll feel confident that they don't have to resort to that specific movement, and I think it's better for the game overall. And yeah, ultimately, if a guy is running out in the open field and you're having to make that crazy recovery tackle where you're chasing him down way from behind, your leverage should be better, and he should not have got out, right? So that's the fundamental stuff, but also there's things you can do with your leverage to prevent him having that type of angle on you. So pursuit angles, all that type of stuff.
Right.
Any other thoughts on that, Griff?
No, you wrapped it up.
Reminds me about Pete Carroll was very upset about the Geno Smith hip drop tackle, which the league ended up showing in their video of like examples of what a hip drop tackle was. And that is one of the more particularly egregious ones, not least because it continued, although the contact started technically inbounds, the contact continued way out of bounds. Got Geno a high ankle sprain, didn't it? And what was weird about that was, and again, concerns about the implementation. I believe Pete Carroll sent that to the league, and there was some question mark over whether that would have been a hip drop tackle or not. So as long as they've cleared up the definition now, fine. That's all fine and dandy. But yeah, But it's good to keep the players safe, and those statistics are intriguing. And thoughts on the new kickoff? Griff? Seems like it'll be cool. I might actually watch special teams tape.
Yeah, that is interesting. Curious to see how that changes the game. I'm excited for it.
When I watched like the XFL for like the first 2 weeks, there was some cool twists and stunts and pulls and all that stuff. It's basically like open field blocking / run fits, kind of a combination. So I'm pumped for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think we have anything else. I saw someone say, Nathan asked, does anyone know where you can find Mike Macdonald's interview at the owners' meeting? Well, there isn't anywhere, Nathan, but this podcast, I've put all the quotes up. You can mute it if you don't want me reading it, but put the significant quotes up and you can find the pictures of that. Chat, thank you for being so nice about my graphics. Lots of graphical praise. Look at that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
They're good graphics. Be proud of them.
I'm so proud of them. Okay. Anything else we've missed? I think that was comprehensive.
Yeah. That was comprehensive. That was good.
Well, we'll be back tomorrow with a look at Texas. Need to decide the game. Could be Texas-Washington, the playoff game. But we're going to be looking at various Texas prospects. The main one, as we promised, is I'm completely blanking on the name. Nose tackle, Byron Murphy, thank you, of Texas. And then also Jalen Ford, his middle linebacker teammate, who Griff really likes as a kind of undersung Mike linebacker prospect. Seattle needs one, by the way. Maybe a fourth rounder.
It's slim pickings out here.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Like more than most. How about that?
Okay, who Griff likes more than most?
There we go.
As in, you like more than most of the linebackers, or you like more than most as in the rest of the analysts?
The first one, but I probably both, because I don't know how highly he's ranked by other people. But,
And then also Texas happens to have a massive interior defensive lineman also playing next to Murphy called Tavonde Sweat. So we'll be looking at him and seeing what he does. So that'll be a fun one. Join us for that. We will always be looking at the chat during that. We'll try and explain some of the stuff, see who pops, try and keep it under an hour and 40 minutes, cycle through it. And yeah, thank you, chat, for joining us. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow Griff on Twitter at CMikeSpinMove, follow me at Matty F. Brown, follow the pod at Seattle Overload. Our schedule tends to be about 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, generally 2 a week, sometimes 3. And obviously, when it comes to significant events, we'll try to go live that night. Also, please do tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a social media forum or whatever about the podcast. Keep it growing. The more we have in the chat, the more keeps us honest, and it's great to have all of you in here. Great to have comments as well. Well, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow, similar time, with the look at the Texas prospects. Until then, Griff.
Until then, just do what you can until we have our next preamble. Try to cope through
It'll
that.
be okay. You can always find it on Apple Podcasts, where you can give us or other podcast apps, give it a 5-star review. And
yeah, Matty, get some sleep. You deserve it. You worked.